Hello everybody, Sifter again with another Loop Hero tier list, and today I'm gonna be ranking the traits of the game. I have some opinions on some of them that might not be the same as yours. Obviously, you are very welcome to comment down below what you agree, disagree, think is a good idea or not, or anything else that you would like to say. So, without further ado, let's start right away. First of all, I want to analyze the rankings here. S is gonna be almost insta pick always. A is a very strong pick. B is most of the time a mediocre pick. C is pretty much a bad pick, or maybe very run reliant or build reliant, dependent. And then we got the trash. Everybody should know what's going in there. And then we got some traits that are only useful in Acts 1 to 3. And in Act 4 they might not be that useful. So, or they might even be, later on the game after you get supplies and the village built up, etc. They might not be that useful. So these are the traits, the tiers, and let's start right away. So, I do not know these names, like how exactly they are called, but I do recall what most of them do. So I will just be going through like that. First trait here is the one that gives you 2% chance to transform any normal resource you get, any shard you get, into a whole resource. 2% is very low, so I would say C, but I will let it in B, because at some point in your run, I'm mostly talking about Act 4, okay? Maybe on the other Acts too, but this is mostly an Act 4 tier list. So, my ratings. If I'm talking about another act, I will be pointing it out. So, as I was saying, in Act 4, you actually get so many resources that this 2% is gonna proc a pretty decent amount of times. Next one is the 15% faster day cycle. This is also useful. Sometimes it's not really that strong, but you can use it to farm out more enemies and more resources within the loop you are in. So this is gonna help you fight more enemies quicker, therefore you will be in lower loop cycles fighting enemies. I don't know if that's understood, but what I'm meaning is that having this thing will help you spawn the boss at loop 5 or 6 instead of spawning the boss at loop 7 or 8, because you will be fighting more enemies, because it's gonna spawn more enemies. Next up is the 20. After you get below 20% health, you unleash a flurry of 4 attacks. So that's also a B for me, because it might help you win the fight, but otherwise it's not gonna trigger ever if you're not below 20%. Obviously, if you go below 20%, it's gonna trigger back to back on every fight you are going into. But I mean, if you have a bunch of attack speed, this is not gonna make that much of a difference. It will make a difference, obviously, but this triggers only when you're at low HP and only once. So in bosses, it might save you and win you the fight, or it might make no difference at all. In the end, it really matters about how close to winning the fight you are and how hardly you are getting hit from the enemies and how hard you hit yourself. If you one-shot most of the guys and for some reason you are the enemies, and for some reason you are at 20% HP, you will be one-shotting every single encounter after you pick this up. If you're not below 20% HP, it's gonna do nothing. And if you're not gonna be 2-shotting or 3-shotting them, then this is just gonna be 4 attacks, and then you're gonna get hit back for a track again. So let's go on. This fills your hand with oblivions, and then each oblivion heals you 10%. I'm between B and A. I will say it's a very high B. Please come to the top. I will say it's a very high B. It's really not combat oriented or universally useful, but it has its times that it shines. Sometimes you want to delete a bunch of mistakes you made, sometimes you just want to heal a bunch. So there are times that this is a good talent. It's definitely not a C, it's not completely useless, but it's also not completely the most powerful ones there. Next up is the 40% chance to retain a potion. I will say this is an S. Maybe people disagree on that. I'm expecting comments on that, but 40% chance to retain a potion, and that being able to trigger itself is really strong, because if you have like 10 potions, normally you have I think 6 or 7, but with about 2 or 3 more supply items that give you more potions, you can have 10. And these 10 have then each 40% chance to retain themselves while you use them. And the ones you retain also have that chance to retain themselves. So it's not 10 potions are 14, quote unquote 14, so it's statistics. It's 10 potions might even be 20 or 25 if you're lucky, and 40% chance is a very high chance too. And each time you loop, you refresh your potions again, so this is gonna be sustaining you very much. Next up is 10% chance to retain a card. This is also very nice. It's very strong. This is, in my opinion, an S pick, because first of all, you can spawn bosses earlier, therefore you fight less, they are weaker, and also you can sometimes retain cards that are very rare to drop, like Oblivions or, I don't know, Treasuries, and this 10% is actually very useful, especially in fighting many enemies earlier in the loop. So the earlier you get this, the better, obviously. Next up is your resource cap is increased by 50%. This is useful only in the beginning, obviously, because in Act 4 there is no resource cap. It is pretty... it is actually pretty useful in the beginning because of the... what's it called? Because there is a resource cap in the beginning. So, straight up, useful in the beginning, as I said, but later on it obviously does nothing. It just gives you some more, I guess, quicker farming in Acts 1, 2, 3, because you will have set up your loop and then you're gonna pick this and just continue looping 2 or 3 more times to get even more resources. Give me a second here, I'm coming back, right back up. Okay, I'm back. So, yeah, that's it for the 50% more resources, obviously useless later. Let's go for the enemies have a chance. I think it's 50% chance to have one less ability. I will go with C, obviously, here, because it's only useful in Act 2 to 3 and 2 to 4. Maybe in Act 2 it might be useful, but in Act 4 an enemy having one less ability is not really that important. Some abilities are important to remove, like immunity to damage to all, or like some abilities like that, or the ability for the thieves to steal your items, but are you gonna rely on a 15% chance for some of them to have the ability remove? I mean, it's really lackluster, and also it's either gonna hit one randomly. I don't know what ability it hits exactly. If it's hitting one randomly, it's bad. In any case, it's really bad, because the last ability most of the time, not most of the time, sometimes is useful for you. Some enemies become worse in Act 4, so that's bad all around. Lightning is gonna go in the trash bin. Obviously, this thing is supposed to do something. If it does something, then I would say it's A. But right now I think it does nothing. I have tried... there is a chance that this thing goes through armor. If it goes through armor, then I will say it's A. Actually, I will say it's B, because there aren't many enemies with armor, and you yourself can't control what enemies are spawning, so you have to choose if you need it or not. You have the choice to pick it up if you have enemies with armor or not, so it's by default B, because it's obviously not an insta-pick. But I have tested it on gargoyles, and I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure if gargoyles even have armor, but if you crit, let's say you're the rogue, this thing has a chance to hit with lightning depending on who you are. If you're the warrior, it's dependent on your vampirism. If you're the Necromancer, it's dependent on your... it's 20% for each skeleton you have. And if you're the rogue, it's your critical chance. If you're the rogue and you crit an enemy, I think it goes through armor anyway. So I might be wrong about that. Nobody knows what exactly this thing does. Somebody said in the wiki that it goes through evasion. That's definitely not true. I have seen the lightning proc and the enemy evaded the damage. So I would say it's trash, because we don't even know what this thing does. If it goes through armor, I will say it's B. Okay, so for now, but we are leaving it at trash though. Next up is you get more damage for the next hit after you kill an enemy. I have been told that it's pretty good. My testing showed that it should be C, but I will say it's a very low B, so the last of the Bs. Reason being is that this thing works only on the fight you are fighting. So I guess that's it. If you're fighting 4 enemies, then after you kill the first one, the next one's gonna get hit once for some damage, a bunch of damage, and then if you kill the next one with that one hit, then you can chain this thing through. But if you don't kill your next target with the hit that this passive provides, then it's not gonna be that helpful. I think it's loop dependent. So let's say this thing does 20 damage. If you're doing 40 damage from your base attack value, then this is just gonna be 60 damage on your next hit. If the enemy have 200 HP, it's gonna do nothing. If the enemy have 50 HP, then it's gonna chain itself. So, I mean, it has its upside and its downside. This is, you have a chance to attack 3 times with 50% damage each. Quickly successful attacks, back to back. I would say it's an A. I could say it's a B, but I will say it's an A because of the utility it provides. It pretty much gives you 50% damage sometimes, because 3 times 50% is 150%. So there's that. And it's also useful if you're gonna kill an enemy that has like 5% remaining, you can and get this proc off and you're lucky, then you hit the first target for just a smidge, and then the other 2 attacks go to the rest of them. So this is also good on that. It's really bad against training dummies because they counter you back a bunch of times, but otherwise it's universally pretty useful. It's also useful against the priestess. So there's that as well. Revive, I will say useful in the beginning. This thing might be good. It should be A, B or C, but at some point you will be beating the game all the time. You won't really be needing the revive. Even in Act 4. In Act 1 to 3, this thing becomes obsolete really quickly because you should be able to beat the loops, and if you see that you are gonna die, you should already retreat. You should not use this thing for any particular reason. Maybe in the beginning you might need it, but otherwise I think at some point you should not be using this anymore. So this is, an enemy has more chance, I think 30% chance to drop resources. I would say it's high B. It's not gonna give you a passive that's actually relevant, but actually I would say A. It's between A and B. I would say very high B. As I said, it's not a passive that's gonna win you the fights, but it is a passive that's gonna give you more resources, and even in Act 4 you care about resources. There is even a supply item that gives you more max HP for each resource you have, so this is also gonna give you a bunch of HP if you got that resource. The supply, why am I saying? Yeah, that supply item. So it's pretty good. Next up, I hope I don't mix anything up. I'm pretty sure this thing gives you more resources. It's a chance when you kill an enemy to get some resources. So next up is the reroll talents. I will give this thing over here. I will have it at the very low A. Reason being is if you have only access to B, C, trash, useful only beginner trash items, actually this thing you can't even find at Act 4. If you have access only to these things here, I would reroll. I would definitely reroll. I would not pick these things up if I had the chance to reroll. I might get worse things, but yeah, I'm definitely rerolling. I might, in the end of the video, I will maybe put it even above some things. So next up is create a mirror when you kill an enemy. This is definitely C in my opinion, because this thing only happens within the fight. So after you leave a fight, the mirrors break. What it does is when you kill an enemy, you get a mirror, which has a 20% chance to take a hit for you instead of you getting hit. The mirror gets hit and breaks. So the reason it's C is because, first of all, it does not stay when you leave the fight. You lose the mirrors. And secondly, the second problem is that only a 20% chance to block the hit, so there's the chance that it won't even do anything, even in the fight that you have the mirror. And the third problem is that when you kill an enemy, then the fight's gonna become easier, therefore the mirror is gonna be less important than if you had it in the beginning. If this was, you start with 3 mirrors in every fight, I would say it's gonna be A, because it was gonna be very good first 3 hits to have a chance to block 3 hits, but because you only get them when you defeat enemies, it's C for sure. Worse than actually, I would say better than the passive. It can block a hit and pretty much protect you from 30 or 50 or 100 damage. So next up is the skilled architect. This one I know what it's called. This thing gives you, okay, this is a meme at this point. I have a copy paste of why it's bad. Time to explain the skilled architect here. This thing, I don't know, some people mix up what it does. This thing gives you EXP when you place a card. When you play a card, when you place a tile on the field, you gain whatever the loop number is. Let's say you're at loop 10, it gives you 10 XP times 8. That's it. When you play a card, it gives you 80 XP at loop 10. Obviously not only one card, you can play 10 cards, it's gonna give you 800 XP. But the reason it's trash is because this thing does nothing else. It only gives you EXP, and you can only gain so much EXP by placing cards. Obviously, playing Oblivions and deleting cards and playing more cards is not something viable. That's not really an argument. You can't say, I don't think it's an argument to say that at loop 1000 I could play an Oblivion and gain 8000 EXP. That's not happening, straight up. So if you sit down and calculate the maths, it should give you about maybe 10,000 EXP, 15,000 EXP, and you have to be really lucky on how early you get it and on how late game you're gonna be placing cards, because at some point you will not be placing cards at loop 15. At loop 15 or loop 20 you should be done with the cards. And the reason it's bad is because this talent itself consumes a talent. Why would I pick this thing up if I could pick this thing up, or this thing, or this thing? This thing, the moment I pick up Skilled Architect, I have one talent less. And Skilled Architect, to pay itself back, does not need to give you one talent, it has to give you 2 talents. If Skilled Architect just gives you one more talent that you wouldn't have, it doesn't matter. If I have 7 talents with Skilled Architect, it's the same as having 6 talents without it. You have to have one more. And the EXP it gives you never ever will give you a second talent. Never. Maybe in the very beginning it's almost impossible, because you will not be gaining enough XP from this in loop 5 or loop 4 or loop 4. And later on it's gonna be completely impossible, because the EXP is scaling, and the one EXP level is 7k, and then the next one is 17,000, so 17,000. And then the EXP level after that is gonna be 36,000 or something like that. So Skilled Architect is never ever gonna give you 36,000, while you can gather that much XP with suburbs. So obviously, if you just want EXP, just play suburbs. And if you have suburbs, this thing is gonna be even worse. This thing does not get any benefit from suburbs, and just because in the explanation it says loops, it does not give you EXP when you loop the map. It just gives you the amount of loop you are times 8 in EXP. So this is completely trash. That was a long rant. There will be links in the video about what is happening on the video, I think, but I don't think I will point out that I'm trashing this thing. Anyway, next up is you leave 10% of your resources when you go through the campfire. This is, in my opinion, useful only in the beginning, because at Act 4 you should have enough skulls. Actually, yeah, not even in Act 4. At some point you should have enough skulls to not care about this thing. This is only useful if you don't have enough skulls. Skulls is a currency that the bosses give you. I think each boss, the first boss gives you 1, the second 2, the third 3, and the Act 4 boss, most of them give you some skulls. So skulls is a unit resource that you consume times the times the act you are at. So if you're at Act 4, you're gonna consume 4 skulls to retain all your resources you found. So this is pretty much useless at that point. If I have 50 skulls, I can just waste 4 skulls to retain all my resources, instead of having to take this talent and wait for a bunch of loops to happen for this thing to protect my resources. If I didn't say what this does, whenever you go through the campfire, you leave 10% of your resources there and save them pretty much. Even if you die, you still keep them, but you can do that with just some skulls, so it's useless. It's only useful in the very beginning when you don't have that much skulls. This thing heals you half a point of HP for each loop amount you're at. I will say it's a B, No, it gives you half a point of HP. So if you're at loop 10, it gives you 5 HP for each time you go through a tile that has tiles next to it. So like vampire mansions or spider camps, whenever you go next to those tiles, you gain half the loop amount in HP. So it's a bit of healing. It's not a big amount. As I said, at loop 10, when the enemies are gonna be doing 100 damage, you're gonna be healing 5 life per tile. And the map's like 30 tiles, so this thing is gonna heal you like 150. It's okay, but it's not really that good. I mean, actually, you know what? I would say this is high C. Because the shields, if the shield's gonna block one hit for 100 damage hit, they're gonna be healing you more than this thing. So, if the math's correct, everything I'm saying here assumes that the text is correct and these things do what they are supposed to do. So if this thing heals you for half a point for each loop you're at loop 20, it's gonna heal you 10 per tile pretty much. And there are 33 tiles, so 330 HP at loop 20. At loop 20, the enemies are doing like 200 damage. So, not per tile, you're gonna get healed for 330 per loop. So, healing once per loop for 330 is not really that good. Next up is 60% chance, I think it's 60% chance to block, reflect ranged attacks. I will say it's high C. I will place it above the shield. Only reason being is that, actually I will say low B, but it's between low B and trash. Okay, so it's either low B or trash. But as I said, I will assume we have a run that cares about this thing. So if we have a run that cares about this thing, I guess it's A. If we are playing with worms, it's gonna be A with temples. But we're not always playing with temples, so it's definitely not A. I will go low B, because sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not. It's never C. It's either trash or useful, so let's say it's B. This thing has a chance to reflect the ranged attacks. The ranged attacks are when the enemies are in the back line. Not in the normal combat, in the line behind combat, so you cannot defeat them. Next up is 5% chance to spawn treasure chest. That is low A, I would say. This thing is pretty much useless on the rogue, but on the other two characters it's pretty nice. Actually, I would say it's above this thing, because you can get a bunch of good items through the chest, and otherwise it's a straight up get more what's they called, equipment items, so it might help you out. It's useful. Next up, now we are in the traits that are exclusive for the fighter, for the warrior. First trait is that 50% of your HP, you gain 50% of your HP as a barrier each time you go through the campfire tile. So each time you complete a loop. Obviously it's an S, because if you have 3000 HP, it's gonna give you 1500. If you have 1000 HP, it's gonna give you 500. Half amount of your HP is really good. This barrier does not get any benefit from defense, as far as I know. But first of all, when you take it, you gain the shield instantly, but that's just a one-time thing, who cares? But the very good upside on this thing is that it triggers itself right before the boss fight, so you will have always 50% more HP in every boss fight you go into, so this is a very strong trait in my opinion. Also, it will give you time to heal your normal HP up. If you have lost some HP inside the loop, when you get to the campfire, giving you that shielding is gonna buy you more time to heal up that normal HP you have in the back. Next up is you have a chance, I think it's about 75%, to stun all the enemies. I think it's actually not all the enemies, it's 70% chance for each enemy to get stunned at the beginning of combat. I would say it's gonna be B. This thing is good only if you 2-shot or 3-shot the enemies with the warrior. If you don't 2-shot or 3-shot them, and the fight's gonna last like 5 to 6 hits, it's you are gonna get hit. It's gonna just protect you for some damage. Actually, you know what? I will say it's above those things. It's here. I will say it's here because it's gonna protect you from some life loss. It's not that useful, but that 1 second you get in the beginning is pretty much free damage reduction, because the enemies are not gonna attack you for 1 second, and 75% chance is pretty high. It's not game winning though, so it stays in B. Next up, warrior again. It's the sword. This thing, sun sword or whatever it's called. This thing I will also place here. It's not a overpowered thing, but it's pretty nice. This thing says that at the beginning of a day, so whenever the day changes, you know when the day changes in the game, I don't know why I'm explaining mechanics. Your next attack is gonna be AoE, so it's gonna attack every single enemy, not only the one you attack normally, and it's gonna do double damage of your base amount of damage. So if you have 50 attack, this is gonna do 100 to everybody. The enemy can avoid it, they can evade it, but still it's pretty useful because it's just one-shotting some fights. In each loop you will be one-shotting about 4 to 5 fights at late game, and that's gonna buy you a bunch of HP. Obviously not broken, and it also could trigger in a boss fight as well. Next up is when you counter, you heal, I think 2 or 3 times or 1.5 times the loop you're currently in. I don't remember the exact number, but this thing's really strong. I would say it's above reroll, obviously. Even above treasure chest, yes, I think it's pretty high A. It's not the most OP thing in the game, but it heals you a lot. And if you get this, just go into a counter build and you will be healing a lot of life on almost every fight. So that's pretty good as well. Next up is your part of your defense. 20% of your defense becomes damage. I would say it's A. No, I missed here. I will say it's below the treasure chest, but it's obviously an A line. This is gonna give you not a lot of damage, but it's gonna give you a pretty good amount. So if you have like 20 defense, it's gonna give you 4 damage, and 4 damage is a pretty decent amount at that level. So at loop, I guess at loop 7 or 8, if you have 20 attack and you get 4 more attack just by this trait, it's a pretty sizable amount. It's not broken, but it's okay, especially for the warrior that stacks defense sometimes. Maybe high B, I would say. I will say A because I will say behind the reroll. If this is your only thing, yeah, I will say A behind the reroll though. Next up is 10% chance. This has been nerfed. This was 10% chance. 10% chance to stun an enemy. I would say I will place this here. These things two together obviously are broken, but I would place this below the healing. 10% chance to stun an enemy is pretty strong, in bosses especially. In non-bosses it's not really that strong, but in boss fights it's really strong because that 10% chance might help you win the fight. And if you have a bunch of attack speed, you should be getting, if you get 5 or 6 stuns off in a boss, it should be a win. It's gonna make a sizable difference. Each stun is gonna be like 200 HP or something. Next up is, for each loop you have done, you gain a defense. This is also very high. I think it's a bit worse than healing, but a bit better than stunning. I would say it's here. This thing also should go down, in my opinion. So maybe, okay, this thing gives you 1 defense for each loop you have done. It works retroactively, so if you're at loop 10 and pick it up, you just get 10 defense instantly. Defense armor, it's the same thing. I think it's called defense anyway. Yeah, so that's it. That's what it does. It's pretty good. It means that you get hit for less, maybe 10 less damage, maybe 5 less damage. It's pretty useful. It's not something OP, but it's pretty okay. It's strong. This thing here is, whenever you dodge, you have a 35% chance to also counterattack. I would say it's above Oblivion. On the one hand, it sounds really good. On the other hand, if you evade and counterattack at the same time, your stamina is gonna go down really quickly, and then pretty much both of them are gonna be disabled. Actually, counter I think isn't even getting disabled, but losing your stamina is not really that good. So, and it's also build item dependent. If you don't have 20 or 30% evasion, this won't be that good. If you have 10% evasion, it's not gonna be useful at all. So next up is, for each potion you drink, you gain 1.5 attack. If you get this early, I will say it's above the reroll. If you get this early, actually even above the triple attack, if you get this early, it's gonna give you a bunch of damage. And there is a high chance that you won't be drinking potions if you're playing the game correctly, but you can try to not use weapons or maybe not equip a shield, and early game try to drink as many potions as possible. You get from the campfire each loop 4 potions, so this can give you up to 6 attack per loop, which is a pretty sizable amount, especially if you pick this up very early. Actually, it doesn't even matter when you pick this up. What matters is that you can drink all your potions, because if you pick this up in the 3rd loop and you have like 10 potions, you still can drink those potions. So overall, it's gonna give you the same amount of damage, and after that, 6 damage each time you drink a potion. It's each time you drink all your potions. Although you won't be doing that, so most of the time this is gonna give you like 3 more damage per loop if you force it. If you try to not equip items and get your life down, you can use this thing. It's pretty good. Maybe, actually, I would say below this. Because you have to do some things, I will say it's gonna be below swords. Double your healing when you're below, I think 30% is the amount. If it's 30%, I would say it's not that good. Give me a second here to look it up. It won't even take that much. So this thing is double healing, 30%. I will say it's low B, not that low, better, maybe not, no, definitely not the days. I will say it's here. Where is this? I would say it's here. Because first of all, you need to have regen for this thing to even do something. And secondly, if I'm gonna go down to 30% HP and have double my regen, I would prefer to just 4-shot the enemies. So it sounds good. If you have, and there are also other problems. If you have like 20 regen, which is a very high amount, how did you get down to 30% HP? If you get down to 30% HP while you have 20 regen, that double regen is not gonna save you. It might save you on the loop you went down to 30 HP, but on the next loop you're gonna die. So this thing is pretty much a trap. It sounds awesome, but most of the time this thing is not gonna save you. Next up is the rogue talents. So now we're at the rogue talents. Let's start with the wolf. The wolf, I will say, is S. Some might disagree. I would say maybe high A. Actually, yes, I would say the wolf is high A, one of the best talents and traits in the game, because it does a bunch of damage. I think it scales with you or with the loops. I say a lot of time that I think. The reason is because we don't get all the stats. We don't know everything from this game. So it scales either from your HP, from your stats, or from whatever loop you're in. In any case, that's useful in its own. And this thing has obviously it doesn't always spawn. It has 75% chance to spawn, but it's gonna take some hits. So it's gonna be protecting you, giving you defense through the hits it takes, and it's also gonna do some damage. So overall, it's very useful. And if you get this thing on the boss fight, it's gonna help you out immensely. It can tank like 500 or 600 HP sometimes, which is gonna save you. Next up is you get less damage after the 3rd enemy, or after the 2nd enemy that is in the fight. The more enemies there are in the fight, the less damage you take. I would say this is gonna be I would say it's gonna be low, not low A, no, not low A, here. I would say it's gonna be high B. This is very run dependent. When you have the map filled with spiders or something, it's pretty decent, but otherwise it won't do much. In the boss fights, it's also not gonna do much. So, yeah. This also scales while you're in the fight. So as the enemies start becoming less and less, this is gonna deactivate itself. So it's gonna help you stay alive, but not that high. Not that useful. Next up is the super crit of the rogue. I would say this is high C. Okay, this might sound awesome. Let me explain what this thing does. For every 10% you're missing HP, it's gonna give you half a point of critical chance. And the critical is gonna be 1000% critical. So it's gonna be a 10 times crit, maybe even 11. It has to do how they programmed it and how it works, but it's either 10 times your damage or 11 times your damage. So this thing is bad because it gives you half a chance for every 10% missing HP. So if you're missing, the max this thing can go to is if you're missing 90% of your HP. So if you are at death's door, this thing, if you are 2 hits or 3 hits from dying, this thing gives you 4.5% chance to crit. 4.5% chance to crit while you are 1 hit away from dying is really low. If it was 10% to crit when you're that low, it would be a good talent. Not an awesome one, but it would be B. But right now, I think it's C. Obviously, when you're not at death's door, it's even less useful. If you have like 20% HP missing, it's gonna be 1% chance to crit, so it's not that good. Next up is every time you fight more than 3 or 4 enemies, I think 4 plus enemies, yeah, it's 4 plus enemies, you get 1 more trophy. This is obviously, no, it's 3, yeah, 3 or more enemies. So every time you fight 3 plus enemies, it's gonna give you 1 more trophy. I will say this is very high up, it's low A. Maybe even better than the roll. Yeah, I would say pretty high, because normally in this game you are fighting 3 and more enemies and getting 1 more trophy for each fight you do. It's gonna be 33 more trophies each loop, which is gonna improve your items a lot. 33 more trophies is a high amount. Most of the time at the filled loop you should be getting about 150 trophies, about there, so having 33 more is a pretty sizable amount. Next up is 10% chance to hit 2 enemies with 1 attack. I will say it's low A, because attacking more enemies than 1 at the same time is pretty good, but 10% chance is pretty low. So actually this is above the reroll, definitely above the reroll. So this thing is, yeah, 10% chance to hit 2 enemies is pretty good. I think it also combines itself with damage to all. So if you get this thing to proc, you attack 2 times and proc the damage to all 2 times. But obviously we don't know, because you have to test these things out, and most of the time everything's getting 1 shot anyway if you have a bunch of damage to all. Still, this thing is very good. Attacking twice is good. Okay, next up is the talent that gives you 3 HP every time you kill an enemy. This is useful only in the beginning. There is a supply item called cheese, which gives you 1 HP every time you kill an enemy, and this is pretty much 3 times a cheese. So if you get at the point where you have 10 cheeses or something, or even if you have 5 cheeses, this thing is worse than just having 5 supply items. And the cheese is pretty easy to find. At least I had very early. I had 10 cheese or 15 cheese very early in my runs. I don't know why I said cheeses. Okay, it's cheese. Anyway, that's it. Next up is obviously the best talent of the rogue. Every time you gain a trophy, you gain 1 more max HP. This is obviously completely broken. This is overpowered. Come over here. It's very, very, very strong. Reason being is because, well, if you gain each loop about 100 or 150 trophies, or even 200, 200 trophies, not really that easy, that possible. If you get 100 trophies each loop, you're gonna get 100 more max HP. If you have a bunch of supply items, it might get worse, but before you get a bunch of supply items, this thing is broken, and this thing can also lead to infinite loops with dunes and other stuff like that. So this is a very, very strong item. Now that I said infinite loops with dunes, I will live stream tomorrow an infinite dunes loop run. So come over there and see the infinite loop run with dunes at 99%. I will obviously be going for rogue and picking this thing up. Anyway, this is broken, so always pick this thing up when you see it. Next up is when you counterattack, not evade, counterattack, you have a 50% chance to steal an item, a resource shard from an enemy. I would say this is C, below the crit, above this thing. Actually, even below, yeah, above this thing. Gaining resources is pretty nice because of the supply items that give you max HP for each resource, but you should not be going counter heavy on the rogue. This is a rogue exclusive, and also if you're not going counter heavy on the rogue, this has only 50% chance to steal resources, so I don't think this is worth it. It will shoehorn you into a mentality of you have to go for counter attack, and you should not be going for counter attack on rogue because you need the evasion from the brutes. So this is useless. Obviously, I mean that counter attack will when you trigger counter attack, you will lose stamina, and therefore you will lose your evasion. So it's a snowball you don't want to go in. So next up is, it's an avalanche of bad decisions is what I try to say. Next up is pickpocket. I know this thing also the name of. This is obviously above the reroll. I would say that it is about here. It's one of the best ones. It's not an instant S. Reason being is because after you gather 100 trophies per loop, you don't want to have this anymore. So it might be a detriment. But before that happens, it's really strong. It gives you better items early in the game. If you pick this up early, it's gonna pretty much give you a free win. The only reason I'm not picking it, placing it in S is because later on, if you go at loop 20 and already have beat all the bosses, etc., and just are farming, it's gonna give you less weapons and less items when you are gonna get 150 trophies. I didn't say what it does. This thing reduces your, instead of gaining 13 items each time you loop, equipment items, you get only 10, or instead of 12, it's 4 times 3, so it's 12. Yeah, instead of gaining 12, you gain 9 items, but they are better than the 12 you would have gotten. Wait, what? 4 times 3 is 12. Yeah, you get 11. Okay, you get 11 items each loop, and this thing is gonna give you, instead of 11 items, you're gonna get 3 less, which is 8. So you will get 8 items, but they are gonna be better. Mental math. While whatever. They are gonna be better, better quality, higher levels, etc. But after you get 150 trophies or 120 trophies, it's not gonna matter. So it would be better that if you would have gotten the 11 items. When I say items, I obviously mean the equipment items you unlock here, right? Anyway, that's it. Next up is rogues. 20% chance. Actually, when you are below 20% HP, you become you get 100% evasion chance for 2 seconds, so you become pretty much damage immune for 2 seconds. I will say this is one of the lower A's. It's pretty good, but if you're at 20% HP, well, you got a problem. The upside obviously is that at some point you won't be losing any more HP for some time, but I mean, you will die. This thing can save you. Oh no, this isn't even that. I explained. Yeah, I explained wrong. I explained completely wrong. I'm sorry. It has been some time since I triggered this thing. This thing is a lot higher. I'm sorry for what I said. This thing, when you lose 20% HP, not when you get 20% HP, when you lose it, each time you lose 20% HP, you trigger the smoke, and the smoke gives you what I said, 2%. For 2 seconds, you are damage immune. So, other than the hunter, obviously, who cannot miss, but other than the hunter, you're damage immune. So this is pretty high here, because you can lose the 20% pretty easily and trigger this thing. Therefore, it's even higher, I think. I would say it's... No, I would say it's here. Below the stun, because the stun can keep you more alive. It's here. It's pretty strong. But you have 4 chances in the fight to become invisible. So... from that alone, it's very strong. And then if you heal back up, you can even become invisible for even longer. So it's pretty good. Next up is the Necro Talents. So the Necro Talents, Necromancer Traits. First of all, he has a bunch of strong traits, so now we should be filling up the S rank. But let's begin. First one is... Wait, I have to look these things up because I don't know them. So first thing is that your skeleton has, after the skeletons kill an enemy, they heal up to max HP, and also they get 10% more damage and max HP. But it's only for the fight you're in, so it's pretty much C. I'm sorry, but it is C. It's really bad C also, because who cares? Who cares if your skeletons heal back up? The only thing this is useful is, I'm gonna say later when it's useful, but other than what time, it's completely trash. So this thing is trash. Healing your skeletons up to full HP and giving them more damage after they kill an enemy. If you have 5 skeletons, they're gonna destroy the enemies anyway. It doesn't matter. You don't need to be healing your skeletons and giving them more damage. It does not matter. Next up is one of the better ones. You just straight up get one more skeleton. This is up here. You straight up can have one more max skeleton. That's it. It just gives you one more skeleton. I don't really need to explain why this is so strong. Next up is counterattack on your skeletons. Whenever you get attacked, the skeletons have a 50% chance to instantly attack the enemy. I will place this at A. I will say this is even above the... It's below the stun, but above the smoke. So if you become the target of the enemies, your skeletons are gonna start spamming the attacks. So your DPS will skyrocket. If you survive long enough, that is. Next up is... You have 20% chance to spawn another skeleton when you spawn your last skeleton. I could say this is S, but there are some times where this can pretty much kill you. It has some downsides, definitely. So I will say it's very, very high A, below the dog, in my opinion. So how this exactly works is the moment you summon your last skeleton, so if you have max skeletons 4 and you summon the 4th one, you have a 20% chance to spawn another 5th one. But the problem is that the downside is, if you have, as I said, 4 skeletons or more, the one you're gonna summon is gonna be an archer, and that means that the frontline skeletons, the melee ones, are gonna be less, because the moment you spawn that 5th skeleton, your max skeletons are not gonna increase, so you will have 5 skeletons on the board, and when one of your skeletons is gonna die, from the front line obviously, you cannot spawn any more skeletons, because you have a max skeleton amount of 4. And you will have to wait for another skeleton to spawn, to get destroyed for you to be able to spawn another one. And all in all, your max skeletons in the front line are gonna be 3 in the example I'm giving. This is very useful when you have a very low amount of skeletons, like 2 or 3, because then you have a very high chance to start spawning more skeletons at the front line. But when you start going to the back line, this has a downside. That's the only reason this is at A, because it has a downside. Otherwise it would be an S. Next up is, as I said, I don't know these things like the back of my hand. I had these in order, but these things got back out of order. Where is it? Where is this thing? Come on. Okay, found it. So this thing is... Oh, I scrolled. Oops. Well, doesn't really matter. Next up is... every time you loop, you gain 25% chance. You gain plus 0.25, so 1/4 of a skeleton level. This is high A as well, above pickpocket. This thing only has upside. Actually, this is... Yeah, you know what? I will say this is S. This is low S. This thing is very strong, giving you a 1/4 of a level on skeleton levels, so 0.25 is really strong, because skeleton levels is how strong your skeletons are, and if you get this very early is borderline OP. This is very, very useful if you find it early. You should not pick it obviously if you're at loop 15 or 20 and are gonna end the run, but if it's your first or your second or maybe your third trade, you should pick this up for sure. If you're in the first I guess first 6 to 7 loops, if you're at the first 7 loops or 8 loops, you should pick this up for sure. And if you're early game and you have to go up to loop 20 to fight the boss, then you should pick this up even at loop 10. If you think that you are gonna stay in the loop for about at least 5 more loops, you should pick this thing up. It's very strong. Having one more skeleton level is very useful. Next up are the 3 skeletons over here, which are that in the beginning of a loop, you gain 3 skeletons that are with you and join you in the fights until they die. So these are the only skeletons that you retain from fight to fight. I would say it's I guess a high C below even this. And having some strong skeletons at the beginning of the loop is not gonna help you that much. It is gonna help you a bit for the first maybe 3, 4, 5 fights, but other than that, it's not good. If you have this plus this, if you can heal your skeletons as well as have the strong skeletons that are retaining themselves, then it's very strong. But otherwise, it's not really worth it. And on higher amount of loops, like on loop 10 or loop 12 or something, they're just gonna die in the second fight, and that's it. And this thing is only triggering once each loop, so it's really bad. Next up, sorry for the scroll again. Next up is the enemy. The skeletons get hit. The damage you take is split among you and the skeletons you have. I would place it at S, but it also has a downside, so I will place it at A, and not even that high amount, not that high. I will place it for these. This is the defensive talent trait of the Necromancer. This thing is very good because the damage you take is split among the skeletons, so you take 20% yourself. If you have 4 skeletons on the front line, which you should always have, you take 20% of the damage and the other skeletons take 20% each. The downside of this thing is that if you're gonna get hit for 200 or 300, there's a very high chance that after 2 or 3 hits, your skeletons are gonna all die at the same time. Maybe sometimes one survives, but there's a chance that every single skeleton is gonna die at the same time. And even if one survives, the next hit you're gonna take is gonna kill that one. And then each time you're trying to summon a skeleton, because you're gonna split the damage between only 2 skeletons, the skeleton might die instantly. Because if you're gonna get hit for 200 and you are splitting 100 between yourself and your skeleton, it isn't gonna survive. So you might not be able to spawn enough skeletons to retain yourself, to sustain yourself, to sustain the skeletons or yourself, or you won't even be able to win the fight after some point. So this is a very risky talent, but it still is very strong, so I have to put it in A, but you have to be very careful about how you use this thing. Next up is whenever the day passes, the first 2 skeletons you spawn are gonna get the improved quality. And they're gonna also get strengthened, I think. They're not only gonna be with improved quality, they're also gonna get strengthened. So they're either gonna be an assassin or a tank, is what I'm trying to say. I will say this thing is C, obviously. Because if you have quality, it's very low C as well. Because if you have quality, just spawning 2 strong skeletons not really that important. I don't know the exact stats that these skeletons get, because we don't have them. But still, it's really bad. Just spawning 2 strong skeletons once a day, actually, when the day changes, and then you lose them, okay? That's the bad side. If the fight ends, you just lose them. So, not really that good. Next up is, whenever a skeleton dies, you heal. This is very good. I will say it's above the sustain, below the... Actually, no, above these things. This thing is gonna keep you alive for a lot of time. For a very high amount of time. This is giving you 3 times the loop HP, so... And you're spawning a bunch of skeletons. Each fight you're gonna be losing 3, 5, 4 skeletons. If you lose 5 skeletons in a fight at loop 5, it's gonna be 25 HP per fight. So this is a pretty decent amount. It's not a low amount. So this is pretty good. Next up is, each time you spawn a skeleton, you gain... 1/4, I think. Give me a second here to look it up. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Yeah, a half point of energy armor. This is extremely strong. This is going into S. This is even above these things. Ooh, this is very, very high. This is here for sure. This is these 2 are the 2 best talents in the game, in my opinion. But I will go for the rogues one. This thing is gonna give you, each time you spawn a skeleton, you will gonna have a permanent. You will gain permanently a half a point of magic HP, magic armor, energy armor, whatever it's called. What this thing does is gonna give you pretty much max HP forever, because even better than max HP, because whenever you start the fight, you gain all your magic, your energy. Okay, it's called energy armor. I'm gonna call it energy armor. Each start of the fight, you gain all your energy armor as added health. So if you have like 100 energy armor. That means that every single fight you have 100 more HP before your HP gets hit. So gaining a half a point for each skeleton you spawn. When you spawn in each fight like 10 skeletons, it's plus 5 permanent HP energy armor, which is better than HP in the beginning of each fight. So if you gain, yeah, each loop is 33 fights or 32 fights, so it's gonna be about 150 more energy if you spawn 10 skeleton every single fight. If you spawn 5, even less, but it doesn't matter. You're gonna get about 20 to 50 to 100 energy armor every single loop, so this can go out of hand really quickly. It's really good. It's really strong. And the last one, the last one isn't really a talent, so this is trash, okay? Just let's start with saying that this thing is trash, and I will be spoiling now. So there will be thing in the, what's it called, I guess the loading bar, in the video loading bar, with which I will have marked as spoiler. So if you want to go ahead and skip this thing, I will say now what it is. I don't know if I will ever trigger it. I want to trigger it later, but okay, I'm starting the spoiler now. So this thing is a trait that you can only get when you have every single trait that you can pick up, which is impossible. You cannot get every single trait. You cannot get your character to level 30 or 40 or whatever you need to get him, 25 I guess. And when you cannot pick any more traits up, then this thing shows up as a trait. And if you pick it, mini boss enemy spawns on the battle board wherever you are. You do not fight him instantly. You have to loop around and go find him because it's spawning on your field, on your tile. And when you fight him, he just has one passive that says, it doesn't even say anything, but what it does is every time you get attacked from him, you lose one of your traits. Not forever, obviously, you lose it for the run. So this is supposed to be an anti-cheater boss, whatever. It doesn't matter. You don't even need to pick it up. If you have gone up to level 40 or 50 and you are gonna level up and this thing pops up, you don't even need to pick it. So this thing is just a meme fight. It's obviously trash. But I think it's really easy to fight too. I haven't fought it because I haven't tried to fight it, but I have seen pictures and seen what it does and how it works. Still, it's trash. So anyway, that's it. So, spoiler end. Okay, for everybody that's back from the spoiler skipping, that's it for the tier list. There were some hiccups with me scrolling by mistake and whatever else, but other than that, I think that's it. Obviously, if you liked the tier list, drop a like. If you hated the tier list, comment down below why you hated it. And if you are 50-50 about if you liked it or not, subscribe to the channel. That last one doesn't even make sense, but doesn't really matter. I have an announcement to make as well. Heads up, I will be streaming tomorrow Loop Hero, and I will be doing an, well, infinite run. At least however infinite we can go. I want to do a dunes run. I want to do a 99% dunes run and try to see how far I can go. I'm most likely gonna be playing with the rogue because I want to use that thing that this thing over here. So we will see. We will see how this thing will go. I have high hopes for it, but come join the channel. And yeah, that's it for the announcement as well. So thanks everybody for watching, and see you guys around.